Thanks for joining us for another awesome webinar. So happy you could be here with us. I'm Colin Campbell. I'm playing host today. I'm the Director of Marketing at Sales Hacker, and I am 100% pumped to be joined by Bobby Narang. He's the VP of Sales at OpenSense. Say hi to the people, Bobby.
Hey everybody, great to be here today.
Thanks for being here. Also here is Lauren Alt. She's a good friend and the marketing campaign manager, right, Lauren?
Correct.
That's the
Hi, everyone.
at Outreach. Hi. Hi, thanks so much for being here. So this one's really special, everybody. So if you're joining, you're lucky to actually be here for the live one, because I think this is an interesting topic. People are going to have a lot of questions. The benefit of being live is you can ask those questions and you don't have to watch the recording and wonder what the answers to your questions are. So today we're talking about how to kind of hack your email, how there are some tricks and tips and kind of secrets like these places in your signature and in deliverability. Don't worry, we're not going to make that part boring. That give you an edge, right? Like I always talk about how I think some of the best salespeople are great marketers, and some of the best marketers are also fantastic salespeople. What we're talking about today, I think, lives right at that intersection. So this is where you can find an edge. We're going to talk about how to improve your email signature without help from IT, how to sneak under the radar of your brand team, and a couple other really cool little hacks. So Bobby Narang is going to walk through all that. Lauren's going to tell an amazing story, and you're going to be like, wow, I want this. So two things to cover before we get into it, and then I'm going to hand it over to Bobby. First of all, as usual, we're recording this. So if you have to step away for any reason, don't worry. We'll send you the recording later. And then the second thing is, right now, guys, go to the Q&A box down at the bottom of your screen, click it, and introduce yourselves. Can you tell us your name and what you got in your email signature right now? I'll start. In my email signature, I've got my phone number, my email, a logo, and I think just a link to the website. Bobby there's a couple things later. Bobby might put me on blast later for that.
Hey, Colin,
It's
just for the good of the community.
I'm open. You know what? I'm my own biggest laughing stock, so I don't mind you calling me out.
All right.
Bert Landa, hi Bert. Damian Kelly's got his logo, his name, email, and a book a meeting link. Clay Nobles is here. A picture, that's good. Name, title, contact info, logo, and links. Bert Landa has name of the company, and contact phone number. Wow, smart Trevor. Trevor Abbott just snuck his whole signature in there. So he's got his title, link to the website, phone, email. All right, a lot of the same stuff here. Mm-hmm. Some smart people are adding some extra stuff and already doing some interesting things here. Cool. I like it. I like it, everybody. I see you, Barb. We'll give you a shout out. Hi, Barb. Thanks for joining us. Okay, so without any further ado, since everybody's joined, everybody's got their Q&A box open and they're ready to ask questions and participate, I'll hand it over to Bobby, who's going to lay out a bunch of secrets and hacks that you can put into your email to increase engagement, get more replies, and just sell more stuff.
Awesome. Thanks, Colin. I really appreciate that intro. And I actually really love that point that you made about your belief that some of the best marketers maybe make some of the great salespeople and sort of great salespeople also tend to make great marketers. I think we see that trend more and more in sort of modern sales with, if you think about sort of outbound prospecting and being able to create that engagement within a recipient's inbox, whether it's with coming up with creative email signatures or interesting content in the body of the email. I mean, these are all things that we as salespeople are kind of required to do today in the modern sales process in order to really engage with our prospects and make conversations and eventually deals happen. So I love that point.
100%.
Love that point that you made. And I think this very much kind of falls in line with that. It's just another layer that we can add as, some of these practices become more entrenched. You're always going to want to look for that edge and things that you can do a little bit differently to make that impact. And so that's where I think there's probably going to be some interesting opportunity for discussion today. Cool. I want to start really quickly. I know Colin was so kind to introduce myself. I'm Bobby Narang, with VP Sales at OpenSense. Lauren Alt's on the line as well, campaigns manager at Outreach. So want to give her a shout out also. But I want to take a quick second today to just really provide a quick overview of what we're going to kind of cover today. Lauren's going to start off by just sort of clearing the air in terms of common misconceptions that perhaps even she and her team had around email signatures and campaigns prior to implementing some recently, and provide a little bit of an overview of just a victory, a win that perhaps was maybe they bet on, but to see the results, we're going to kind of hear a little bit of a story around that. We're then going to transition a little bit to talk about email signatures and really what are their impact? Why are they so meaningful? Why do they matter today in the modern sales practice, and specifically around email signature banners, how to even make effective banners? Like, we call this the sales hacker community. So I have like a pretty neat, I think, trick to leverage some of your existing marketing functionality or marketing campaigns to create banners sort of on the fly. And really some ideas of how you can make the most out of those banners throughout your sales process. So email deliverability basics is something I think is worthwhile in covering, because I think signatures are something that you would modify in your email. And frankly, anytime you make a modification in your email, add an attachment, include a link, maybe modify your signature, there are some potential impacts that you should be aware of from a deliverability standpoint. But with some really easy, low-hanging fruit tools that I'm going to provide you with today, we can make sure that we're kind of getting ahead of those and ensuring that we're doing the right things to make sure the messages are hitting the inbox. And then we'll kind of close out with some additional insight into the results of Outreach's initial campaigns there.
And can I just say, on the point of deliverability, when I hear the word deliverability, I kind of want to go to sleep, but I also know that like everybody else feels that way.
Mm-hmm.
So what I do is like drink a cup of coffee and listen and then try to pay attention, because I know if everybody else is sleeping on it, it's something I can win on. So that's the part everybody should take notes on. Take notes on all of this, but if nothing else, deliverability. Because if you're going to put effort into improving your email signature and doing some of these tricks, you got to make sure it gets to where it's going.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And we're just going to talk about very much the low-hanging fruit, just some really, really easy tools stuff to be aware of. Yep. Awesome. Cool. So let's actually get going here. Lauren, I'm going to toss the baton to you, and would love for you to talk a little bit about some of your initial misconceptions, perhaps, about the email signature channel.
Yeah, thanks, Bobby. I was a little bit confused as to why you asked me to talk about my misconceptions before we implemented email signatures. Maybe I'm the most jaded marketer, or because I'm a marketer who appreciates outbound sales since I work at Outreach. But I'm assuming that a lot of other people had the same concerns, whether you're a marketer or a salesperson or whatnot, as I did when it comes to implementing email signature management as kind of a marketing channel. The first one was that I was obviously concerned about deliverability. Colin says that he falls asleep when he hears that word, but as marketers, I built my career in email marketing and marketing ops, so that's something that a word that we're scared of, but that we embrace and we talk about it a lot. So that was something that I immediately thought that would be affected by implementing this into our outbound sales emails. The second thing was that response rates on our outbound sales emails would decrease. So I work very closely to make sure that our outbound sales team and our sales development team is able to convert inbound leads to meetings as well as work outbound leads. And so I was concerned that the email signature as a channel would take away from people responding to our emails. And at the end of the day, that's the goal, is like to drive bottom line and set meetings and have growth. So I wanted to make sure that implementing something like this within a sales email versus like having links out to landing pages in a marketing email would drive the results that we're intending.
Oh, so Lauren, you were concerned that they would click the link instead of responding, not in addition to responding? Yeah.
Okay. So a lot of our sales emails are plain text, obviously, and we don't have a lot of links because the goal of them is to get people to respond and for our SDRs to be able to book a meeting with them. And so, my traditional marketing world was that marketing emails are for awareness and for nurturing and for educating and to get form fills and all that kind of stuff, and that sales emails were then to convert and to build a one-on-one relationship. I wasn't sure if we could do both, so that was like a concern that I had. The third was like, I'm not sure if it's a lead generating channel. I've been like successfully avoiding outbound cold emails from people within this space for a few years now since I heard about it. Maybe not the best thing, but I just wasn't sure if it was a scalable lead generating channel for us, and whether or not, like, I just assumed there's other low-hanging fruit there. And I wasn't sure whether or not it actually could drive inbound leads instead of just awareness. And the fourth was that I wasn't sure it would render really properly in our sales engagement platform, which of course we use Outreach. I wasn't sure, how that would work, how it would land in other people's inboxes when it was sent through our Outreach server. So that was the last concern I had. And the fourth one's really easy to prove wrong because Bobby I think I met you at Dreamforce and you're just like, oh, I'll just send you an email from my phone from Outreach. And then it landed in my inbox and it was actually, it rendered perfectly. Because I was like, Outreach doesn't support HTML. I think I said that. And then you're like, I figured it out. And then if you go to the next slide for me, you can see this is just an example of an email that was sent from Outreach yesterday, actually, to my inbox. And so, in fact, rendering was not really a problem for us. The way that we use it now is effective and doesn't skew anything. So those were the common misconceptions that I had, and I assume that other people on the line, marketers or not, may have. And so I wanted to share that. So I'll pass it back to you, Bobby.
Awesome. Yeah, I do remember that interaction, and I was very excited to show that to you directly out of Outreach as an Outreach user ourselves. So I appreciate that anecdote. So let's keep it moving here a little bit. Before we take off with the email signatures, I kind of just want to set some additional context here of how you want to kind of think about leveraging signatures in your outbound emailing, whether it's prospecting or in day-to-day follow-up. I call this sort of a pre-flight checklist. Ever since I watched Top Gun as a kid, I just love the idea of having to walk through these. So I bring it to email outreach and prospecting. So basically, we're going to start with some of the things that we're going to use to sort of create impact with the email signature. It's not just about the banner. That whole email signature, I think, seeing some of the things that you all are already doing with the signature in the Q&A window, it kind of conveys that clearly we all understand that there's impact to be had there. So let's talk first about some of the basics. Branding, why that's important, making sure that your information is accurate and clickable as more and more emails are being sent and viewed from mobile devices. That's a huge way to create impact. High value things that can be done to create impact. And again, I heard folks are already doing some of these things, the calendar link, including some elements that reduce friction and increase engagement during your sales process. And then finally, of course, the email signature banner and what that can potentially mean for your prospecting or your selling. Under the hood, then, again, we just want to touch on some really low-hanging fruit tools that you just want to be aware of. Easy things that you can do to make sure that you're doing everything you can to make sure not only that your message is received, but then ultimately that it's well received as well. So just want to set some context around this before we kind of start talking about email signatures. And I love this sort of the screenshot of Exhibit and Pimp My Ride. I don't know. Again, I like to frame myself as an elder millennial. We were kind of joking about this before kicking off here, but yeah, we're gonna make sure that your email signature has a signature. So let's go ahead and talk a little bit about our first tip here, and this is really about that sort of the impact of your branding. So I really just want you all to kind of take a step back and think about this for a second. For every 100 people in your company, the average person sends on average about 34 emails a day, 5 days a week, 50 days a year. There's about a million emails being sent for every 100 people in your company.
Wow.
And the average email, and we have sort of a really powerful analytics platform on our backend, so we get some really interesting insights into this. The average email is opened on average between 2 and 3 times. So 100 employees will create between 2 and 3 million brand impressions every year, just in their day-to-day sending from Gmail, Outlook, mobile devices, whatever. And so really, and I'm wondering if you all have ever encountered this, this lack of consistency in your email signature branding is something that it's creating an inefficiency. In fact, we oftentimes work with customers to help to implement that sort of standardized branding. And I got to tell you this really funny story. We were working with a customer once, and one of their engineers actually had, not an inspirational quote per se, but an entire block quote of Klingon beneath their
Oh
email
my.
signature, which, we were working with them. We actually found a Klingon translator on Google. It was somewhat innocuous, but certainly something that left the brand team's jaw on the floor that we were, tasked with sort of scraping off. But really, I think, you want to sort of, as a sales team, and again, I love the idea of working on a team, and I know salespeople, we have our ways about us, but ultimately we are working together as a team. Wearing the same uniform creates an impact. And I think that's something that's somewhat underrated, and something that I would totally encourage you to kind of collaborate with your team on. And I like to cite these examples again: elder millennial movies here, Little Giants. I'm sure you remember the ragtag group of kids who ended up looking pretty intimidating in their proper uniforms, and of course the Mighty Ducks, one of my all-time favorites. It just makes a difference when you're all sort of putting your brand out there during your prospecting, during your selling, looking aligned, and making sure that everyone's kind of, again, working together to achieve that consistency. So that's sort of like tip and trick number one. I'm sure there's some element of this that you're already doing today. In fact, one of the ways that most people, and Colin, I hate to do this to you, but it's going down, man.
That's all right.
It's
I'm
not
ready.
it's not uncommon, but a lot of times, in order to achieve that consistency and wear that same uniform, a really easy way to do that is simply to take your colleague's email signature and kind of just copy and paste it into your own. That's fine. But here's a tip that you need to be aware of. Sometimes when you copy certain elements of the signature over, so for instance, in this case, I'm going to point out Colin's email address. The mailed to, or the actual click through target sometimes doesn't change, even though you change the email address from your colleagues that you've copied and pasted. In fact, when Colin and I were communicating about this webinar last week, I noticed that his email, when you clicked on it, actually popped open, mailed to his colleague, Sydney. And this is just sort of like a common thing that happens sometimes, but something I was like, hey man, I hope you don't mind, but I might put you on blast during our webinar about this sort of common thing that occurs occasionally.
It could have been
Yeah.
intentional. He could have been trying to siphon off some of his emails to Sid.
Totally.
I would never.
So if that's the case, if you want to siphon off your work to your colleagues, then forget this tip. But just something to be aware of, because I see this all the time. It seems really simple to just copy and paste, but if you're not paying attention, you're going to end up with not only sort of email addresses, but you can actually make your phone numbers also clickable. And this is actually a really, I think, interesting and potentially powerful use of the signature. Is about 30% of the time, recipients are going to be viewing your email from their mobile device. Think about how difficult it makes it for me as a recipient of Colin's email if I can't click on that to trigger a call on my iPhone or my Android. So just a little, again, simple trick here is, create a hyperlink around your phone numbers, use the format tel:, and include your phone number. And all of a sudden, like when you're sending emails, no matter where someone is viewing it from, you're going to have that quick ability to just, again, reduce that friction, increase the engagement. And that's really what we're looking for as salespeople at every turn.
All right. So before anybody starts making fun of me, what you're saying is this is a very common mistake.
Absolutely.
Okay, I'm not an outlier. I already fixed the email link, but now I can go in and now I know how to fix the telephone link. That's a good tip. Thanks.
Yeah, you totally did. I was looking for this example and I had to dig through a few emails to find it. So I'm glad to see that you did. But yes, to your point, in the name of wearing that same uniform, that copy and paste method oftentimes will yield this result. So just something to be aware of as you're sort of getting your signatures configured consistently across the team.
Awesome. I love that tip. That's such an easy thing.
Yeah, awesome.
That I did wrong.
I was really pleased to hear that some of y'all are already using your book a meeting link. I mean, like, this one's really straightforward. You don't need to spend a ton of time on it. But again, the theme of reducing friction, increasing engagement, takes our team on average about 4 emails to book a meeting, like whatever the case is, whether it's a sales meeting, customer success meeting, whatever. Including this meeting link is just a way that, again, we can reduce that friction. It promotes almost this sort of like open door policy with your customers, which, again, with our businesses, you want to really make sure that that customer feels like they have access. It's one of those things that ensures that you have a happy customer and someone that's less likely to kind of feel like they're being neglected. Creating this open door policy with the calendar link is just, it's a really powerful addition. And the cool thing is, like, if you're using an Outreach has their calendaring tool. HubSpot has calendaring tools, Calendly. I mean, you can use any of those services to make this a really, I think, valuable add-on to your email signature. Again, in the name of reducing friction, increasing engagement. So really simple one. We don't need to spend a ton of time on that. So then let's finally talk about the banners, which is why everyone's here today. I think, one of the first questions I want to ask, and I think a lot of people will ask when you hear sort of the engagement numbers, is why do they work so well? I think Lauren alluded to this a little bit earlier, that as a marketer and a decision maker within her organization, she's getting dozens of emails from prospectors every single day. They probably don't look terribly dissimilar than what you're seeing on my screen here, where you have sort of a body, a potentially clever message that maybe creates some or conveys some elements of the value proposition. We'd call that, in the context that I'm conveying today, we'll call that the active engagement. Okay, so, hey, this is who I am. This is what we sell. Do you want to set up a meeting to talk about it? However, if you notice in the bottom of the screen, what really catches your eye on this page is actually that banner, and Outreach created a beautiful one with a subtle animation. Very much catches the eye, more so than frankly anything else in the context of this message. Call that passive engagement. Okay, so your message is sort of in the body of the email that you're sending, and is templated, and it's what we're using to drive those conversations. But really, what's jumping out on the page to someone who sees about 50 of these types of emails every single day is this really attractive, eye-catching banner that's sort of presented passively. So we're finding that actually, when we look at the numbers, we looked at some research that MailChimp actually put forth this year, where we looked at a link in the context of your standard or traditional email marketing, whether it's MailChimp message, whether it's a drip email from Outreach, SalesLoft, HubSpot sequences. On average, your links are being clicked about 2.5% of the time. What we see with banners, however, is a number that is almost twice as much. On average, between 4 and 7% of your recipients are actually clicking on those email signature banners. So the impact is somehow significantly more. And again, when we think about why that is, it's sort of that active versus that passive engagement. What's actually catching your eye in the context of dozens and dozens of emails that are going out for prospecting purposes on a day-to-day basis. So the impact there is real.
Yes. Like there are some easy things that can be improved, but then also like having in email signatures, but then also like inclusion of a banner. So when you look at organizations that are thinking about adding something like OpenSense, I don't know. I imagine maybe part of the reason it's hard for people to get their heads around this is because there are so many. It's a complex sale. Like there's marketing who cares about the branding, there's salespeople who care about how they look, and then they have to implement it like on an individual level, and then there's probably some IT inclusion, right?
Sure.
So like if I'm a salesperson and maybe this isn't going to come from my budget, can you give me advice for like how I can make a case and how I can start to, like, is it just that I have to hack my own email signature and start to use it and be an example, or like how do I go about that?
Well, I mean, you can certainly start there, but I think like as salespeople, think about all the initiatives that are coming down the pipe from marketing. You're attending an event, a local event. So your marketing team might say, "Hey, these are the 1,000 people in your territory that you need to reach out to promote this event," or "Hey, we're recently featured in a Forrester or Gartner report. Send that out to your top 100 clients." Many of these initiatives are reflective of the activities that marketing is already engaging in, like event promotion, content creation, hosting conferences. I mean, these are initiatives that organizations are already kind of engaging in. And I think what's useful about this is that Whereas like your typical email blast probably has, if you're lucky, about a 20% open rate. Emails that salespeople are sending are open on average like 90% of the time. So it's this trusted channel through which, again, we can leverage this sort of passive engagement to promote initiatives that frankly are already occurring. So I think like just understanding that, hey, look, marketing is trying to find ways and channels through which to promote these initiatives. The sales channel is one that, again, we talked about. For every 100 people in your company, about 1 million emails are being sent. I mean, it's an opportunity there that's already on the table, that whether you do it on your own or with a tool like ours, it's there for the taking. And we want to really encourage companies to take that opportunity and make the most of it.
So I know we're going to talk about deliverability later, right? Because Barb Giamenko has some, I don't know if I said that right, Barb, has some good questions about that. Am I going to rush you if we start that now, or should I hold those questions?
We can totally talk about those.
Okay, cool. So Barb says she used to include logos in the signature, and that she heard sometimes it causes emails to bounce or even get blocked, and that a lot of people even receive emails in plain text without any HTML. So can you talk a little bit about that? And you know, where's the balance, right? Like if you want a fancy signature, maybe you get better engagement from the people that actually can receive it, but what's the risk of adding extra elements?
I mean, that's a great question, and I'm going to kind of parlay that question into, I think, a little bit of an overview of what Barb's concern is, and really, I think, how to think about this. Because the fact is that everything that we do to an email has the potential to impact deliverability. Okay, so starting with a basic email, hi, will you please buy my product? Well, maybe we want to include a URL, like a link to our website. Well, the URL has a potential to impact deliverability, believe it or not, particularly if we're using any type of tracking tools. Attachments, you want to send out like a white paper or a deck that can potentially provide an overview of the value proposition. Totally has the potential to impact deliverability. This one is crazy to me, but it's reflective of what I've always sort of, or what I've learned to call sort of the voodoo of spam filters. Believe it or not, and Barb, this might directly sort of address your question. The ratio of image to text in the body of a message has the potential to impact deliverability. Meaning, like, your images carry with them a certain weight, like in kilobytes, and so does your text. Well, actually, if that ratio is of a certain level and your recipient mail server is of a certain sensitivity, that has the potential to trigger a spam flag. So
what's better is more text to image ratio?
Yeah, so I mean, like, it's something to be considerate of. Like, if you are sending like an image-heavy signature, to make sure that you're doing so with like a meaningful message. But that this also is specifically around what I would call sort of inline images. So I'm sure you all have encountered images in Outlook where perhaps, and I have a little bit of a screenshot example here that I think could resonate. Let me see if I can find that. But basically, Outlook, for instance, by default blocks images, whereas, here we go. So here's an example of two emails that I sent into Outlook with two different image formats that have, again, are treated differently by Outlook, and also it's also relevant to this sort of deliverability question. There are images that can be embedded within the body of an email. So in the context of this banner, I've simply copied and pasted it as my email signature in Outlook. Well, because that image is literally embedded in the body of the message, it's going to appear automatically when I send that email into Outlook, which is totally a positive. However, the negative is that it does contribute to that sort of image to text ratio that I talked about before. So if I have a sensitive mail server, that could potentially trigger a flag. So what's the alternative? Well, the alternative is by uploading what we call a hosted image. So if you notice in your email clients, whether it's Gmail or Outlook, you can upload an image by URL. In doing so and adding that to your email signature, you're uploading what's called a hosted image. The good news about that is that when you send that email into Outlook, it doesn't contribute to that that text to image ratio because it's hosted on a server somewhere. It's not actually in the body of the message. So when we talk about the weight, it's actually weightless. It carries with it no weight. So you're increasing your odds of deliverability in that regard. However, the downside is that with Outlook, you have this situation where hosted images require that download images. So the funny thing about this, Colin, is that there's multiple ways to skin the cat in terms of how to create the most impact. But both carry with them pros and cons. So I think what's really important about this is to use tools that are available to you to understand your audience. If you're selling a more IT heavy solution, for instance, it might be that you're sending emails more predominantly into an Outlook environment or an Exchange environment where images are blocked by default, where you might benefit more from having those inline images. Whereas if you're selling into like a more tech, like a tech company, like an Outreach, a Salesloft, a Salesforce, they're likely to be using Gmail by default. And Gmail by default shows images by default. So you're going to benefit greatly by just using hosted images. So we actually provide some tools, and I'm sure there are other tools available in the market where you can actually perform technology assessments of your recipient base to understand, hey, how should we actually be delivering this message? And the neat thing is I think you can do either, but I think the point is that you want to optimize for your audience by having some understanding of that.
Got it. Cool. So I know you were kind of on a roll, and I know we're talking basics of deliverability today.
Yeah.
I want to let you get back to where you were before, but real quick, if anybody wants to read deeper about deliverability, can you suggest any places they should look for that?
I think, any email company will have, some great insight into this. Top of mind, let me think about that, Colin. Before the end of this webinar, I'll have a couple of resources for you to share.
Come back to you. Okay, great. Thanks, man.
Yep, you got it. So now, so Barbara, I think your question is a great one, and it's super relevant because this wouldn't be a sales hacker webinar if we didn't do a little bit of hacking here in terms of actually taking some ideas of how we can use banners and actually creating them and using them. So before I show you some easy ways that you can make banners that have an impact, I just want to put a disclaimer out there because this is something that I think brand teams won't particularly care too much for because we are going to be hacking a little bit here. But I promise you, as salespeople, these little hacks are actually going to create, I think, a significant impact. So just throwing the disclaimer out there.
I'll cover my ears.
Okay, thanks, Lauren. I appreciate it. The first step in creating a banner, and again, this is what I was talking about before, about really riding the existing wave or the current that's created by your marketing team in terms of the initiatives that they're running. Start by going to your company's website. If your marketing team is doing their job and doing it well, theoretically, they're trying to accomplish the same thing that you would be with your banner, which is increasing engagement and subsequently increasing conversions. So in this case, I just decided to use Outreach's website as an example, but I encourage you to check out your own. And you'll notice the first thing that appears when you go to Outreach's website is, frankly, this really clear sort of message. And you even have a call to action here. As a salesperson, someone who's interested in creating something on the fly that I could add to my email signature, I'm actually just going to crop that, screenshot that, and identify, because I've identified some things that I think are going to be particularly impactful. So for instance, this white register now button, it's so contrasting to the background of the image. It jumps off the page. It's clear, register now. It's a very clear call to action. A little industry tip here is that this banner also contains this play button. If you can find a play button in the context of your website where the message just kind of fits adjacent to it, the play button is super, super powerful. We see about 2x engagement with the play button relative to a standard CTA. So it's like a really, I think, an important and powerful element. So, but you'll notice, I'm just going to toggle back and forth here. I've just literally used my screen grabbing tool to kind of crop down the image that I just screenshotted from my website. And you should scour your site, you can find these on your white paper pages, your resource pages, your videos pages, customer testimonials, anywhere where you can find something that's already defined to generate that engagement and that click through is perfect to use as your own sort of email signature banner and campaign.
I love that tip. That's such an easy homegrown thing to do.
Yeah, totally. So that from there, it's really about just sort of making it look right. So obviously, like I took something from a website that was fitted to my 15-inch Mac screen here. Sizing it down to about 400 pixels is really where we want to live. I think 400 pixels generally fits quite nicely in the context of most common email signatures that we see.
Including on like a mobile device, that'll show up okay?
Yeah, it'll render great on desktops, mobiles, etc. Somewhere between that 400 and 500, we recommend 400, but I think outreach has maybe even gone a little bit less, a little bit skinnier than that. But 400 is typically where we recommend to our customers. And then from there, I mean, gosh, you just can add it either like in that copy and paste method that we talked about before, creating that inline for our more Exchange Outlook heavy recipient base, or upload by URL for a more Gmail oriented recipient base. Either option is going to work. You can include the click-through URL as well, so create a hyperlink around it. What's really cool about this is that if you are using any type of email tracking tool, like your Yesware, Tout app, HubSpot, Sidekick, whatever, that URL is actually also going to be tracked. So what's neat about this, again, when we think about that active engagement and that passive engagement, is that you're going to be notified when that passive engagement is actually occurring. So it's really neat because you're sending an email, but you might get a notification, hey, someone actually clicked on my banner for this event that we're promoting. That's something interesting to me and something that's going to be worthwhile and keeping in mind for my follow-up conversation. So it's like a really, really simple way to kind of take, again, the tools that are already available, the content that's already available, to make an effective email signature campaign as a salesperson.
Oh, that's great. Yeah.
So we talked a little bit about sort of inline versus hosted. I think this is kind of a neat slide, because I think, as salespeople, again, we're constantly looking for ways to make sure that messaging is relevant. And so an idea here is, your messaging might change with a prospect as you move them through your sales funnel. You may even have templates that you've saved to address certain aspects in each stage in the funnel, like certain follow-ups that occur when qualification is done, a follow-up that occurs post-demo, a follow-up that occurs as you send a proposal, etc. So the neat thing here is that you can actually configure email signatures in those templates, because those templates can actually include the signature, that contain just standard content that you want to promote to create that impact through the email signature channel. These are just some ideas, but you want to start with more general evergreen type content on the top of the funnel, like your about us for the company, maybe like an ebook that's sort of, again, that cornerstone content that your marketing team's created, maybe a product overview video, maybe just a high level, hey, we're going to be at Dreamforce this year, or Ignite down in Florida, wherever your sort of your big annual event promotion is occurring. But then as you sort of, again, become more in tune with your customer, go through that qualification process, provide the demo, provide the proposals, perhaps you start including a little bit more relevant content in the signature. ROI calculators, I see a lot of those on B2B websites these days. A relevant case study, just high level, like how people have achieved X, Y, and Z using our product. Your latest blog could be something that, again, it becomes a little bit more relevant as after you've sort of had that first communication with your customer. Really, as you're getting closer and closer to the close, getting a little bit more targeted with your local events, a local lunch and learn, a golf tournament we're hosting in Chicago. These are some things that tools like ours can really help with, like really kind of lining up in a more targeted fashion, but certainly with a little bit of manipulation, you can achieve sort of similar results on your own. And then customer testimonials, again, make a lot of sense as you're sort of pushing towards that close. And then once you do close, the signature banners can again yield some really interesting information, like customer satisfaction. We have customers that leverage a really simple "how's my service" type banner that is useful to kind of ensure that NPS and that we're doing what we can to really retain and hopefully expand our customers throughout their time as a customer with our company. So these are just some ideas that I think like could be useful, and just again some examples of banners that we've seen that we think are pretty cool and pretty effective. So just to kind of get the gears turning a little bit with the folks on the call, to kind of just see what might make sense on their current website today, and perhaps even looping in some of your brand team to help make just 5 or 6 like super easy, super impactful banners that could be useful during your sales process. But again, I think that the powerful thing about this is that it is creating that level of engagement that we see nearly twice as much as your sort of standard just dropping a link into an email. So there is some real engagement to be had here.
You know, I have to say, I love how you think about the funnel and matching signatures to that, because when you think about it, the amount of email, right, that goes out that people are seeing, and so many people have like a top-down email signature where some brand person, if there were any, you know, if they were thinking about it at all in the first place, said, okay, here's everybody's signature, everybody use this same format. Not necessarily appropriate for every customer before or after point of sale. So in those cases where it's like a top-down, here's one signature that everybody uses, we have a question actually from Yvette Mendez Kelly. So the question is kind of, I mean, it's kind of like a management, I guess, question, or like a getting permission versus asking forgiveness question. Because, like, what happens in that scenario? I mean, you see this a lot. So when people want to implement your suggestions, how can they go about it without bending the rules, or sell up to whoever's holding the keys to unlocking something a little bit more nuanced?
You know, I got to be honest with you. I encountered this a lot because, you know, we perform, frankly, email signature audits with our customers. And I would say, you know, it's one of those things that some companies are, their sales teams are just more entrepreneurial. Like, for instance, you know, just again, reading off some of the comments and earlier, I see that a lot where people are already taking things off the website, or and including their calendar links, et cetera. In terms of getting that internal buy-in, I think like what I always think is kind of effective is just sort of like creating like a really simple like pitch internally. Again, I think the numbers kind of speak for themselves. Like if you needed to go this far, rather than just doing it, is just creating those simple examples using some of the methods that I've described, just screenshotting your own signature in the context of like, hey, we could be promoting our event this way, or this Gartner report, or this case study. And just knowing that for every 100 people in your company, you're sending 1 million emails a year. Between 4 and 7% of your recipients are going to click through on that content. And just letting internally people understand and really know that, hey, we own this 1 million email channel. I mean, yeah, sure, we could go to Google and we just released this really I think interesting blog that for every 500 people in your company, there's about, I want to say $100,000 of media value associated with the emails that they're sending out. Again, we talk about the sends and the number of opens, the overall number of impressions. So without even doing any real work, you can make the case to say, hey, we're actually leaving this money on the table in terms of media value. And our company is already investing in all of this different content. I think there's a really easy pitch to be made internally, particularly if it's something that's going to help move the needle from a sales standpoint. Ultimately, the content wouldn't exist if it didn't move the needle from a sales standpoint.
Yeah, that's the big one.
Yep. So this is just another channel through which, you know, you have the ability to kind of to really leverage that content, and again, in a way that's meaningful. And, you know, like I said before, with some of the tracking, like if you're already using some type of email tracking, getting that notification that perhaps someone is clicking on a banner that's more upsell or cross-sell oriented. Maybe you don't get that response back, but now you have a data point to operate off of. Like, hey, next time I talk to John, I'm going to make sure I bring up product B, you know, even though he's just purchased product A so far, because you have that extra data point. So there's a digital body language aspect of this as well that I think is super relevant and super powerful to salespeople, particularly like.
So Yvette, you could write down all the wonderful things, not to pat ourselves on the back too much, but you could write down all the wonderful things Bobby and Lauren are saying. You know, we're going to send the recording of this webinar out, so you can grab that and send it around to your team and try to build a groundswell of support. Or you could just test something. Might get a little slap on the wrist, but you also might get some better results. So
yeah, and I will say that as a customer / marketer who's a decision maker on these types of purchases, one of the most impactful things was seeing the email audit that Bobby was talking about, and like showing me everybody's signature in the organization. Some of the salespeople did hack their email signatures, and some of them looked okay. Some of them looked horrible. Some of them were using purple Comic Sans. And that is like an eye opener in terms of like, wow, I had no idea there's so much disparity in terms of like what email signatures look like across the org. And it was actually kind of terrifying. In addition, there's a lot of content that people were trying to promote that were super old. So like a Forbes article that we were mentioned in 2014, like there's just better analyst reports, there's better things that they could be doing. And if you're doing this at like a system level, it was kind of a no-brainer once you saw the nightmare that is email signatures, like from an audit perspective. So I would recommend, if you're trying to sell up to somebody in your organization, I would just recommend that they maybe do an audit of, you know, what people are doing within your organization when it comes to email signature. It's probably similar to what I experienced.
Great tip from someone who would know what the hell they're talking about. Cool. So we've talked about like how to pimp your ride, how to put an email signature on your email signature.
Yeah.
I know we touched on deliverability a little earlier. I think you've got more for us there. So I want to make sure we get to all that.
Yeah.
Now that we've done all this work, right, it's got to get to the place, and there might be a few pitfalls, it sounds like.
Well, I mean, these are just things that I think, whether or not you do email signatures, just as prospectors, there's some really low-hanging fruit in terms of tools that are available to us today that can help us just make sure that our efforts aren't falling on spam's ears, I guess you could say. I'm trying to make
on no ears. Or
no ears, no eyes, nowhere at all. So I just want to just provide a quick tool and quick tip under the hood that as prospectors, as modern prospectors, I want us to be aware of, because I think it's super useful in the context of what we're trying to achieve. So we talked a little bit earlier about some of the different things that can trigger potentially a spam filter. And again, just to kind of reiterate, as salespeople, we send emails, obviously. We send emails with links. We send emails with attachments. We should be sending emails with useful and engaging email signatures. So how are we going to make sure that these messages aren't ending up in spam? Well, believe it or not, there's a really powerful tool available to you that's super easy to access and read. And I want to teach you how to do that today, because this is something that if you're a frontline salesperson, your company will pat you on the back if you find something here that shouldn't be there or isn't properly configured. And since it's so easy to do, I wanted to share it with you. So the easy trick number one is I call it check your SPF. Okay, and that's not a sunscreen reference. That's literally an email authentication tool that can be very easily accessed. And I'm going to show you how. So basically, the first step is simply to send an email to your personal Gmail account. Sending it to personal Gmail makes it super easy. I'm sure you could accomplish it in a Yahoo or a Hotmail account, but I totally recommend the Gmail account because they've made this reporting like really easy to access. So here's a screenshot, you could say, of me sending an email to my personal Gmail account. What it looks like as a recipient. So the first thing that you're going to want to do is find those three buttons on the right-hand side and click that button first. It'll pop up in this menu. And you're going to hit this button here called Show Original. Okay. This is something that, frankly, before working at OpenSense, I stayed 100 feet away from at all times, but I've actually found there to be some really interesting insight when you hit Show Original. In fact, at the top of your Show Original, and if you're on your computers right now, I totally encourage you just pop into your Gmail and just check this out now. It actually shows this sort of report, and this report contains elements of email authentication that your company is currently engaging in today. The one that I really want you to just quickly focus on and just take a look at is this one called SPF. And really what we want to see is passes all around. If you see passes all around, you got nothing to worry about. You're in great shape. And you should do what you're doing with confidence because your company is engaging in the highest levels of email authentication possible. However, I would say something like 20-25% of the time, when you hit Show Original, you might see something that looks a little bit like this. In this case, it's a soft fail. If you see something, say something. Remember that. It's not just for subways. It's for your email authentication as well. So in this case, you could see an SPF soft fail. Another example, you might see something like an SPF perm error. So why this is important is because when you send an email, your recipient's mail server is checking this SPF report. And if it sees passes, then it's all good. If it sees perm error or soft fail, it's likely going to be a little bit more strict in terms of some of the things that you're doing in the email, like the links, the attachments, the images in your signature, etc. So first and really simple trick here is just check to make sure that your company is doing what they need to do on the SPF side. Send yourself a test email and just check this SPF record. Again, if it says pass, you're golden. If you see perm error or something like a soft fail, find someone who you trust and just let them know that this is going on, because it does need to be addressed, and it's going to impact your deliverability whether or not you're managing the email signatures. So
when you say someone you trust, that would be like an IT
ideally,
manager?
yeah, ideally. So like a manager, I mean, this is certainly something that your IT organization would need to kind of address. So if you have access to them, that would totally be the best person to reach out to.
Okay.
And just even including a screenshot would be I think super helpful.
Cool. I just some people saw me taking notes because I'm going to do this later.
Okay, that sounds good. I want to, and if we're good on time, I just want to mention one more thing, because I think companies like Outreach, I think, deliver value on this. I know a bunch of other companies are doing the same. We do some of this as well, but predictable tracking URLs. So we talked a little bit earlier about how you can use Sidekick or Yesware or whatever to track your banners. Well, something to be aware of, and I only noticed this just this week. This is actually an email that we got from a prospect. We actually used Sidekick on a tracking link for an NDA, believe it or not, and Google Chrome has this crazy level of, like, they call it safe browsing, but it just sort of created this massive red block on the recipient screen. Obviously doesn't look great. This is sort of a browser's approach to see when they see that t.sidekickopen.com. So really why this is important, or why this is relevant. So you'll notice, like, if I send a tracked link and hover over the saleshacker.com URL that's tracked, when I hover over it, the click-through at the bottom here doesn't just say saleshacker.com. In fact, it's wrapped with this t.sidekickopen.com URL. That's how Sidekick actually is able to communicate to you, or Yesware or ToutUp is able to communicate to you that, hey, this link's being clicked. They wrap the saleshacker.com URL with a tracking URL that has a notification associated with it. The problem, though, is that mail servers and browsers are smart, and they start to recognize patterns. If there's 1,000 people using Sidekick today, sending emails into a company, all of those emails are going to contain tracking URLs with a similar pattern. And eventually what happens is that these mail servers become smart and they detect that pattern. And then they'd add those patterns to different blacklists. And so what you run the risk of, to some extent, is having your tracking URLs, whether it's in the body of an email or the signature banner, potentially triggering the blacklist, which could all of a sudden cause your emails to either bounce or go to spam. So another trick to keep in mind is that if you have a tracking vendor, talk to them about branded URLs. Outreach does it. I know of several other companies that do it. If you aren't doing it today, talk to your vendor. If they don't do it, I recommend finding a vendor that does, because again, in this era that we live in, things are becoming more compliant. Things are becoming more strict. These are things that we need to do as salespeople, as marketers, as IT organizations, as companies, to make sure that, again, that message is being received and, of course, well received. So low-hanging fruit, just a couple tips that, as an employee at an email company, I thought I would be remiss if I didn't share in the context of today's conversation.
I like it. This has actually been extremely helpful, and we've gotten a lot of thank yous already. I want to make sure that I think we have a couple minutes here for questions. And there was one question Yvette asked earlier that I didn't get to, but because we're talking about deliverability, this is one I want to throw in now. Embedded video in email. Good, bad, does it hurt engagement? What do we think about it?
It's all good, as long as you are just being cognizant of those URLs. Because here's the thing. Let's say I'm sending an email from a saleshacker.com email account. And probably more in the weeds than you want. But when you send that email and that recipient server receives that email, it sees it's coming from Colin@saleshacker.com. However, in the body of the message, it might see something like video.com/Colin/pitch.mp4. That URL doesn't match with your sending domain. Your sending domain is saleshacker.com. The domain of the URL is video.com. Anytime you have mismatching URLs in the body of the message, that has the potential to increase the spam score. So if there's a way for you to white label that with your vendor, go for it. I mean, I think the data speaks for itself in terms of the engagement. Only thing to be cognizant of there is your provider providing a white labeled URL where rather than it saying video.com, it says video.saleshacker.com.
Right.
That actually matches up, and that actually doesn't trigger those the spam filters in the same way.
Lauren, from like a marketer's standpoint, I know you have a huge background in email marketing. How do you feel about embedded video and email?
Embedded video and email, I mean, as a marketer, I'd usually say do something like a screenshot and link out to a video. That's usually like a good hack. Like Bobby was saying earlier, having a play button on an image is very powerful. So I always recommend you can get the same effect by having a picture of a video and with the play button on it and then linking out to a landing page that's hosting it so that you don't have to impact your deliverability.
Cool.
Yeah.
There we have it, folks. If there are any other questions, you might be able to sneak them in. Go ahead and pop them in. Can't say I'll answer them all, but we'll do our best. So we also wanted to end here on finishing the story that we started earlier because we're not done yet. We told you how it started, that Lauren didn't love the idea and we started using it, and Outreach has had some success with it, I think, but Lauren's going to tell you exactly what happened.
Yeah, I mean, I was jaded, and now I guess as a millennial, we'll say that I'm woke around email signature management. Can I say that?
I think so.
And so we used Unleash, our upcoming sales conference, as a way to kind of use email management to get awareness out there. And I thought it was going to be just that in terms of like just getting eyeballs on Unleash and learning about it potentially, but we actually did see like a close to 10% lift in paid ticket sales just from our email signatures. So direct signups from the email banners, which was pretty shocking to me, to be honest.
Wow.
And those are people who have committed 3 days of their life and a fair amount of money to purchase a ticket. And so that to me is I mean, that proved 2.5x ROI on our investment in the software that we use which is OpenSense, to manage this. And so to me, that was worth it within itself. And it also got a lot of executive awareness, like, within my executive C-suite, they have it now in theirs, and they now have more awareness of Unleash and other marketing programs. So just internally, it was good as well.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And because we love Outreach and we're excited about Unleash, we're doing something today for everybody that joined this webinar. So if you're still listening, thanks for hanging out with us. You have a special promo code that you can use to buy tickets to Unleash. There are only 100 tickets left. We're sold out almost. We're going to get there pretty soon, and the conference is still almost a month away. So act fast. Your promo code is SHPOD, SHPOD. And what's that promo code for, Lauren? $100 off, I believe.
Yep, $100 off. And we're still doing, I want to say we're still selling one, buy one, get one. I could be wrong. My field marketer is Mel's going to yell at me. But I think we still have a discount right now, like a special promo going this week to get a discount on our tickets. But this will give you an extra $100 off.
Awesome. All right. So everybody, thanks again for joining us. To Bobby and Lauren, thank you so much for your time. Check out Unleash if you haven't yet. SHPOD is your promo code. Check out OpenSense and get in touch with Bobby if you have more questions that we didn't get to answer today. He'll hook you up. I don't know. That's all I got. Roll credits.
Appreciate
Thanks,
it, everyone. I'm seeing some questions about deliverability. Don't hesitate to reach out to me. I'm always happy to provide a little bit of an expert eye. So take note of my email address if you want to connect offline. Happy to.
There you have it, folks. We'll see you at the next Sales Hacker webinar. Thanks for being here, everybody.